Cop orders man to open trunk. Realizes he's being filmed in a shocking twist. Brandon Tucker drummed his fingers on the steering wheel of his patrol car, watching the morning light creep over the buildings of Cedar Grove. The coffee in his cup holder had gone cold hours ago, but he didn't mind. After 15 years on the force, he'd gotten used to lukewarm coffee and early mornings. Before we can continue, if you love your family, subscribe to this channel to help up creating amazing stories. Now, let's continue. The streets were quiet, just the way he liked them. A few early birds headed to work, their cars cutting through the morning mist. Tucker checked his watch, 6:45 a.m. His shift had started at 5, and so far, nothing worth noting had happened. That's how he preferred it. Keep things orderly, deal with problems before they got big, and everyone goes home happy. Unit 247, checking in, he spoke into his radio, his voice carrying the authority that came naturally after years of giving orders. The dispatcher's voice crackled back, confirming his location. Tucker turned onto Maple Street, his eyes scanning the familiar storefronts. Old Joe's Hardware was just opening up, and he nodded at Joe himself, who was unlocking the front door. The old man waved back, but Tucker noticed a hint of hesitation in the gesture. That's how most people reacted to him these days, respectful, but distant. He didn't mind. Respect was more important than being liked. Tucker had learned that lesson early in his career, back when he tried to be everyone's friend. That approach had earned him nothing but trouble. Now, he ran his patrol route like a tight ship, and the crime statistics proved him right. Cedar Grove had the lowest crime rate in the county. The morning wore on, and Tucker settled into his routine. He'd stop at the usual spots: the high school parking lot where kids sometimes hung out before classes, the back alley behind the liquor store where he'd caught more than a few people trying to buy alcohol for minors, and the quiet residential streets where people felt safe leaving their garage doors open. His mind wandered to last week's departmental meeting. The captain had talked about community engagement and building trust. Tucker had sat there, keeping his face neutral while internally disagreeing with every word. Trust wasn't built by being soft. It came from consistency, from showing people that rules existed for a reason and that breaking them had consequences. The sun climbed higher in the sky as Tucker turned onto Route 16, a long stretch of road that connected Cedar Grove to the next town over. Traffic was picking up now, but still lighter than usual. Most people stuck to the speed limit here. They knew Tucker patrolled this road regularly. His reputation preceded him, and that's exactly how he wanted it. He spotted a silver Honda Civic ahead, moving slightly under the speed limit. Something about the car caught his attention. Maybe it was the way the driver kept glancing in his rearview mirror, or how the car seemed to drift slightly within its lane. Tucker had learned to trust these little tells. After thousands of traffic stops, he could spot nervous behavior from a mile away. The Civic's driver checked his mirror again, and Tucker's suspicion grew. In his experience, people who had nothing to hide didn't keep looking back at police cars. He'd seen it countless times, the guilty conscience revealing itself in small gestures, tiny mistakes that most people wouldn't notice. Tucker maintained his distance for another minute, watching. The car was well maintained, no obvious defects or violations. The license plate was clean and properly mounted, but something still felt off. The driver's posture seemed too rigid, his movements too calculated. Years of experience had taught Tucker that sometimes the most suspicious behavior came wrapped in a perfectly normal package. He thought about the captain's words again, about building trust and community relations. But Tucker knew better. Sometimes maintaining order meant making people uncomfortable. If this driver was clean, he had nothing to worry about. And if he wasn't, well, that's why Tucker was out here doing his job while others slept. Decision made, Tucker flipped on his lights. The Civic's brake lights came on immediately, too quickly, Tucker thought. Almost like the driver had been expecting it. The car pulled over smoothly, coming to a stop in exactly the right spot. Not too close to the road, not too far onto the shoulder. Perfect compliance could be just as suspicious as resistance. Tucker called in the stop before exiting his vehicle. The morning had warmed up enough that he didn't need his jacket, but he kept it on anyway. Appearance mattered in this job. Looking sharp meant being taken seriously. He adjusted his belt as he approached the Civic, noting how the driver sat perfectly still, hands visible on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. Most people fidgeted, reached for their documents early, or made some kind of nervous movement. This guy was different. The window was already rolled down by the time Tucker reached it. He kept his right hand near his hip, a habit born from years of experience. The driver looked young, maybe mid-20s, with short dark hair and clean-cut features. Nothing remarkable about his appearance, but his calm demeanor stood out. Most people showed at least a hint of anxiety during traffic stops. "Morning," Tucker said, using his authoritative voice, not aggressive, but firm enough to establish control. "License and registration." The young man nodded, his movements measured and deliberate. "Of course, officer. May I reach for my wallet? It's in my back pocket." Tucker noticed the precise way the driver announced his movements. Most people just reached for their documents, often triggering a warning from the officer. This guy knew the drill, maybe too well. "Go ahead," Tucker replied, watching closely as the driver retrieved his wallet. No sudden movements, no fumbling. Even the way he handed over his documents seemed practiced. The license identified him as Alexander Ruiz, 26 years old, from the neighboring town of Millbrook. The registration matched the vehicle. Everything appeared in order, which only made Tucker more suspicious. In his experience, things that looked too perfect usually weren't. "Where you headed today, Mr. Ruiz?" Tucker asked, studying the young man's face for any sign of deception. "Visiting family in Cedar Grove," Ruiz answered, his voice steady. He maintained eye contact in a way that most people avoided during traffic stops. "My aunt lives on Oak Street." Tucker nodded, though he didn't believe the story. Oak Street was in the opposite direction from where Ruiz was heading, but he couldn't call him out on it without revealing how well he knew the town's layout. Sometimes it was better to let people think they were clever. "You were driving a bit under the speed limit back there," Tucker said, testing the waters. "Any particular reasons?" Ruiz's expression didn't change. "Just being careful, officer. It's a beautiful morning for a drive." The response was too smooth, too rehearsed. Tucker had dealt with all types in his career. The nervous ones who couldn't stop talking, the angry ones who challenged his authority, the ones who broke down crying. But this calm, almost serene behavior? That was rare, and in Tucker's experience, rare meant trouble. He stepped back from the car, documents in hand, maintaining a clear view of the driver through the rear window as he walked to his patrol car. Each step felt heavier than usual, his instincts screaming that something was off about this stop. The morning sun cast long shadows across the road, and in the distance, a truck rumbled past, the only other vehicle Tucker had seen since initiating the stop. Back in his patrol car, Tucker ran the license through the system. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, but his mind kept returning to Ruiz's unusual composure. The results came back clean, no warrants, no outstanding tickets, not even a parking violation. The registration was current, the insurance valid. Tucker stared at the screen, frustrated by the lack of red flags. He'd learned long ago that just because something was legal didn't mean it was right. His gut told him there was more to this situation, and his gut had rarely led him wrong. The morning silence was broken only by the soft hum of his patrol car's engine and the occasional crackle of radio chatter. Tucker watched Ruiz in his mirror, noting how the young man hadn't moved, hadn't reached for his phone like most people did during traffic stops. He just sat there, waiting, as if he had all the time in the world. Tucker made his decision. Sometimes maintaining order meant pushing boundaries, testing limits. He'd found more than a few serious violations by following his instincts, even when everything looked fine on the surface. If Ruiz was clean, he had nothing to worry about. And if he wasn't, well, that's what Tucker was here for. Tucker stepped out of his patrol car, Ruiz's documents in hand. The morning had grown warmer, and sweat began to form under his collar. As he approached the Civic again, he noticed how the sunlight caught something in the car. Maybe a reflection from a phone screen or a watch face. He dismissed it, focusing instead on the task at hand. "Step out of the vehicle, please," Tucker said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. He watched as Ruiz processed the command, noting how the young man's expression remained unchanged. No surprise, no fear, not even annoyance. Just that same steady gaze that had been bothering Tucker since the start. "May I ask why, officer?" Ruiz's voice was respectful but firm. "I've provided my documents, and they're all in order." Tucker felt his jaw tighten. He wasn't used to people questioning his authority, at least not so calmly. Usually when people pushed back, they did it with anger or panic. This composed resistance was something new, and he didn't like it. "Standard procedure," Tucker lied smoothly. "Won't take long if you cooperate." Ruiz nodded, his movements deliberate as he unbuckled his seatbelt. "I understand, Officer Tucker," he said, reading the name from Tucker's badge. The way he said it made Tucker's skin prickle. There was something in his tone, not disrespect exactly, but a hint of something else. Knowledge, maybe. Or preparation. As Ruiz stepped out of the car, Tucker noticed more details. The young man's clothes were casual but neat. Dark jeans, a plain blue t-shirt, clean sneakers. Nothing flashy, nothing suspicious. He stood straight, hands visible at his sides, maintaining a respectful distance. Everything by the book, which only made Tucker more suspicious. "Where did you say your aunt lives again?" Tucker asked, testing him. "Oak Street," Ruiz replied without hesitation. "Number 847. Tucker caught the detail. He hadn't asked for a house number before. Most people wouldn't volunteer that information unless they'd prepared their story in advance. His suspicion deepened. "That's quite specific," Tucker said, watching for any reaction. "And you're headed there now?" "Yes, sir." Ruiz met his gaze steadily. "Sunday brunch. It's a family tradition." Tucker glanced at his watch. 9:17 a.m. The timing fit the story, but something still felt off. He'd learned to trust his instincts over the years, and right now, they were telling him this was more than a simple family visit. "Mind if I ask what you do for a living, Mr. Ruiz?" Tucker changed tactics, trying to catch him off guard. "I work in digital media," Ruiz answered smoothly. "Content creation, mostly. It's interesting work, lets me meet all kinds of people, capture all sorts of moments." Something about the way he said "capture" made Tucker pause. He looked more closely at Ruiz's car, noticing for the first time a small device mounted near the rearview mirror. It could have been a GPS unit or a phone holder, but somehow, Tucker doubted it. The morning traffic had picked up slightly, occasional cars passing by on Route 16. Each time a vehicle passed, Tucker noticed how Ruiz remained perfectly still, never turning to look at the traffic like most people would. His focus stayed entirely on Tucker, as if he were studying him, memorizing every detail of their interaction. "Digital media," Tucker repeated, letting skepticism color his voice. "That must be interesting work." "It can be," Ruiz agreed, "especially when unexpected things happen. Those make for the most compelling content, don't you think?" The question hung in the air between them, and Tucker felt the first real stirring of unease. There was something about the way Ruiz emphasized unexpected things that felt like more than casual conversation. The young man's calm demeanor hadn't cracked, but Tucker sensed he was building to something. A truck rumbled past, its wake stirring up dust from the shoulder. Tucker squinted against the morning sun, studying Ruiz's face for any sign of deception. The younger man stood patiently, hands still visible at his sides, waiting for Tucker's next move as if they had all the time in the world. "Open the trunk," Tucker ordered, deciding to push further. He needed to either confirm his suspicions or put them to rest. The morning was getting warmer, and he could feel sweat beginning to trickle down his back under his uniform. Ruiz's eyebrows lifted slightly, the first real change in his expression since the stop began. "Is there probable cause, Officer Tucker?" The question was posed politely, but Tucker heard the challenge in it. Most people didn't know to ask about probable cause, and those who did usually spat the words out like accusations. Ruiz's calm delivery made it worse somehow, as if he were reading from a script he'd prepared long ago. "I have reasonable suspicion," Tucker said, falling back on familiar phrases. "Your cooperation would make this go a lot faster." "I understand," Ruiz said, reaching slowly into his pocket. "Let me get my keys." As Ruiz turned toward his car, Tucker noticed him press something on his phone. A small red light blinked on the device near the rearview mirror, and Tucker's stomach tightened. He'd seen similar setups before. Dash cams were becoming more common, especially among younger drivers. But something about this felt different. The trunk popped open with a soft click. Ruiz stepped back, maintaining that same measured distance, hands still visible. Tucker approached the trunk, aware that Ruiz was watching his every move. The trunk was neat, almost too neat. A small gym bag sat in one corner, a folded blanket in another. A first aid kit was secured to the side wall, and a bottle of water rolled slightly as the trunk opened. "Planning to work out after visiting your aunt?" Tucker asked, nodding toward the gym bag. "I like to be prepared," Ruiz replied. "Never know when you might need a change of clothes." Tucker reached for the bag, but Ruiz spoke up again. "Officer, I should mention, everything that's happening right now is being recorded." Tucker's hand froze halfway to the bag. He turned slowly, meeting Ruiz's steady gaze. The young man hadn't moved, but something had shifted in the air between them. The morning suddenly felt warmer, the traffic noise more distant. "Recording is perfectly legal," Tucker said, his voice level despite the tension building in his chest. "Of course," Ruiz agreed. "That's why I'm doing it. For legal purposes. And for transparency." The word transparency hung in the air like smoke. Tucker thought about the captain's recent talks about community relations, about building trust. He thought about the department's body camera policy, which he'd always viewed as a necessary annoyance. Now, standing on the shoulder of Route 16 with this unusually calm young man, those policies felt more relevant than ever. "Mind if I check what's in the bags?" Tucker asked, his tone professional despite his growing unease. "Actually, I do mind," Ruiz said, still perfectly polite. "Unless you can articulate your probable cause. I'm happy to wait while you call for a supervisor if you prefer." Tucker felt his face grow hot. In 15 years, he'd never had someone so calmly resist his authority. The fact that it was all being recorded made it worse. He could hear his own heartbeat now, feel the sweat gathering under his arms. The morning sun seemed brighter suddenly, more exposing. A car passed by slowly, its driver clearly curious about the scene on the shoulder. Tucker noticed Ruiz tracking the vehicle with his eyes, the first time he'd looked away from Tucker since the stop began. Something about that small movement made Tucker realize he wasn't in control of this situation anymore. Maybe he never had been. "You've done this before," Tucker said. It wasn't a question. "Done what, officers?" Ruiz asked, his voice innocent but his eyes knowing. "Visited my aunt? Driven under the speed limit? Exercised my rights as a citizen." Each question was like a small tap on a cracking glass, testing its strength. Tucker felt the familiar ground of authority shifting under his feet. The morning had started like any other, but now he stood in uncertain territory, faced with a young man who seemed to know exactly what he was doing. Tucker closed the trunk with more force than necessary, the sound echoing across the nearly empty road. He'd found nothing suspicious in the gym bag, just workout clothes, a pair of sneakers, and a water bottle. Everything exactly where it should be, organized with a precision that felt deliberate. "All right, Mr. Ruiz," Tucker said, trying to regain control of the situation. "Why don't you tell me what's really going on here?" "I'm not sure what you mean, officer." Ruiz leaned casually against his car, though his hands remained visible. "I've been completely honest with you." A semi-truck roared past, creating a momentary wall of noise. Tucker waited for it to pass, using a moment to study the device near Ruiz's rearview mirror more carefully. The red light still blinked steadily, like a tiny mechanical heartbeat. Something about it bothered him more than it should. "That's quite a setup you've got there." Tucker nodded toward the device. "Seems pretty professional for a simple dashcam." Ruiz smiled slightly, not a smirk, but something close to it. "It's good equipment. Records in high definition, has excellent low-light capability. Perfect for capturing important moments." "Important moments," Tucker repeated, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "Like routine traffic stops?" "Especially those," Ruiz agreed. He reached into his pocket slowly, pulling out his phone. "Would you like to see how it works?" Tucker's hand instinctively moved toward his hip, but Ruiz's movements remained deliberate and non-threatening. The young man turned the phone screen toward Tucker, showing what looked like a live video feed. Tucker saw himself from an angle he wasn't used to, standing on the shoulder of Route 16, morning sun casting harsh shadows across his face. "It's streaming right now," Ruiz explained, his voice casual, as if he were discussing the weather. The quality is pretty good, don't you think? You can even read your name tag. Clearly. Tucker felt his mouth go dry. Streaming? To where? Oh, various platforms, Ruiz said vaguely. It's amazing how many people are interested in these kinds of interactions. They want to see how their public servants conduct themselves. The words public servants hit Tucker like a physical blow. He'd always seen himself as an authority figure, someone who commanded respect. But Ruiz's careful phrasing turned that authority inside out, making it sound like a responsibility rather than a right. Look, Tucker started, trying to keep his voice steady, if you're trying to create some kind of incident here, not at all. Officer Tucker, Ruiz interrupted smoothly. I'm just exercising my right to document my interactions with law enforcement. For safety purposes, you understand. These days, you can never be too careful. A car passed by slowly, its driver clearly rubbernecking at the scene. Tucker wondered if they were watching the stream right now, viewing this interaction from the comfort of their home. The thought made his collar feel tighter. How many people are watching? Tucker asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Ruiz glanced at his phone. Right now? About 300. The numbers tend to climb when these stops go on longer than usual. People get curious, you know? They wonder why a simple traffic stop is taking so much time. Tucker felt sweat rolling down his back now, and it wasn't just from the morning heat. 300 people. 300 pairs of eyes watching his every move, analyzing his words, judging his actions. The quiet stretch of Route 16 suddenly felt very exposed. The comment section is quite active, Ruiz continued, his voice still maintaining that eerily calm tone. People are asking why you pulled me over. Should I tell them it was for driving under the speed limits? Tucker felt his face flush. Put that way, the reason for the stop sounded absurd. He could almost hear the comments now, the criticism, the questions about profiling. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Of course, Ruiz went on, filling the silence, they're also curious about why you wanted to search my trunk without probable cause. That's always a popular topic in these streams. People are very interested in their constitutional rights these days. Another car slowed as it passed, the driver not even trying to hide their curiosity. Tucker resisted the urge to wave them on. Any show of frustration now would just make things worse. He was beginning to understand that every gesture, every word, was being recorded and scrutinized. I've learned a lot doing these streams, Ruiz said, checking his phone again. For instance, did you know that in most jurisdictions, driving under the speed limit isn't probable cause for a stop unless it's creating a hazard? There wasn't much traffic when you pulled me over, was there? The question hung in the air like smoke. Tucker thought about his initial decision to make the stop, how he'd relied on instinct and experience. How would that look to 300 viewers? How would it sound to the captain, who'd been pushing for more community-friendly policing? 400 viewers now, Ruiz updated casually. People really engage with these streams. They share them, comment on them, analyze them. Sometimes they even reach out to department supervisors with their concerns. Tucker felt his stomach twist. He'd always operated with a certain level of autonomy, trusting his gut and dealing with situations as he saw fit. But now his actions weren't just being observed. They were being broadcast, discussed, dissected by hundreds of strangers. Look, Mr. Ruiz, Tucker started, trying to sound professional despite the dryness in his mouth. If everything checks out, you're free to go. Checks out? Ruiz raised an eyebrow slightly. What exactly are we checking for, Officer Tucker? My documents are in order. My vehicle is properly maintained. I was driving safely, perhaps too safely, by your standards. What else needs to be verified? Each question was like a small cut, precise and carefully placed. Tucker realized he was losing ground with every word. The familiar script of authority he'd relied on for 15 years was useless here. A police cruiser appeared in the distance, heading their way. Tucker felt a mix of relief and anxiety. Backup would help, but it would also mean more witnesses to this increasingly uncomfortable situation. The cruiser slowed as it approached, and Tucker recognized Officer Martinez behind the wheel. She gave him a questioning look as she passed, probably wondering why a simple traffic stop was taking so long. "That was Officer Martinez, wasn't it?" Ruiz asked, still maddeningly calm. The viewers are wondering if she's going to stop too. Some of them recognize her from other streams. The casual mention of other streams hit Tucker like a bucket of cold water. This wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the department, about policy, about the way they all did their jobs. And somewhere in Cedar Grove, his captain might already be getting emails about the stop. The morning sun felt hotter now, more intense. Traffic had picked up, each passing car a potential viewer, each slowing vehicle another witness to his growing discomfort. Tucker stood on the shoulder of Route 16, feeling exposed in a way his bulletproof vest couldn't protect against. Tucker cleared his throat, painfully aware of how the small sound would be picked up by Ruiz's high-quality recording equipment. The morning traffic continued to build, each passing vehicle a reminder of his exposed position on the shoulder of Route 16. 500 viewers now, Ruiz commented, glancing at his phone. They're quite interested in how this is going to play out. Someone just pointed out that we've been here for 23 minutes. 23 minutes. Tucker ran the number through his head, thinking about how this would look in a report. A routine traffic stop shouldn't take this long. He knew it, Ruiz knew it, and now hundreds of viewers knew it too. "I need to check something in my vehicle," Tucker said, trying to buy himself some time to think. His voice came out steadier than he felt. "Of course," Ruiz replied. "Should I wait here?" The question was perfectly polite, but Tucker heard the real message behind it. "I'm not going anywhere until this plays out." He nodded stiffly and walked back to his patrol car, feeling the weight of unseen eyes on his back. Inside his car, Tucker grabbed his radio mic, then stopped. What would he say? That he'd pulled someone over for driving carefully and now found himself being broadcast to hundreds of viewers? That he'd searched a trunk without probable cause while being recorded? None of those options would play well with dispatch. He glanced in his rearview mirror. Ruiz stood exactly where Tucker had left him, one hand casually holding his phone, the other visible at his side. The red light on his dashboard device continued to blink steadily. Tucker noticed for the first time that it wasn't just one camera. There appeared to be multiple lenses, probably capturing different angles. A notification sound chirped from Tucker's department-issued phone. He picked it up, his stomach sinking as he saw a message from Captain Reynolds. "Call me when you're clear from your current stop." The captain shouldn't know about a routine traffic stop. The fact that he did meant people were already reaching out to the department. Tucker could imagine the social media messages, the emails, maybe even calls to the station. All while he sat in his patrol car, trying to figure out how to handle a situation that had spiraled far beyond his control. Another car slowed as it passed, and Tucker recognized Mrs. Henderson from the grocery store. She worked as a clerk there, and Tucker had always made a point to be visible in the store, believing his presence deterred shoplifters. Now she was watching him with undisguised curiosity, probably wondering why Officer Tucker was sitting in his car, while a young man stood waiting on the shoulder. Unit 247. His radio crackled to life. Status check. Tucker grabbed the mic. 247. Still on traffic stop. Route 16 near mile marker 23. Copy that, the dispatcher replied, but Tucker caught the slight pause before the response. Even dispatch was wondering why a simple traffic stop was taking so long. He looked at his options, laying them out in his mind like items on a desk. He could let Ruiz go, but that felt like admitting defeat. He could try to find some violation, some reason to justify the stop, but every minute spent searching would be broadcast to an ever-growing audience. He could call for backup, but what would he tell them? That he needed help with a perfectly cooperative citizen who was simply recording their interaction? Tucker stepped out of his patrol car, the door closing behind him with a sound that seemed too loud in the morning air. As he approached Ruiz again, he noticed the young man had barely moved, still maintaining that perfect balance of cooperation and resistance. Nearly 700 viewers now, Ruiz informed him casually. Someone just shared the stream in a law enforcement accountability group. They're particularly interested in the length of this stop and the trunk search. Tucker felt his jaw clench. Every word from Ruiz seemed carefully chosen to remind him of his vulnerable position. The camera continued its silent witness, its red light steady and unwavering. "Mr. Ruiz," Tucker started, trying to sound authoritative despite his growing uncertainty. I need to be clear about something, Dash. Of course, Ruiz interrupted smoothly. Clarity is important. The viewers appreciate that too. Should I move closer to the camera so they can hear better? Tucker faltered, his prepared speech dying in his throat. A new car slowed as it passed, and he recognized one of his daughter's high school teachers behind the wheel. The man's eyes widened in recognition before he drove on, and Tucker wondered if he'd be checking the stream later, sharing it with other teachers, maybe even mentioning it to his students. The comment section is quite active, Ruiz continued, filling Tucker's uncomfortable silence. People are sharing similar experiences, discussing department policies. Someone even found Cedar Grove's official guidelines on traffic stops. Would you like to review them together? The suggestion carried a weight that made Tucker's uniform feel too tight. He knew the guidelines, of course, they were part of basic training. But having them publicly scrutinized, potentially compared to his actions this morning, made his mouth go dry. That won't be necessary, Tucker managed, trying to keep his voice level. A bead of sweat rolled down his back, and he wondered if the camera would pick up his discomfort. 800 viewers, Ruiz updated, checking his phone. They're curious about what happens next. Someone just asked if you're waiting for backup. Are you, Officer Tucker? The question hung in the air between them. Tucker realized he'd been standing there without speaking, without acting, just watching as his authority eroded with each passing minute. The familiar weight of his badge felt different now, more like a spotlight than a shield. Another police cruiser passed by, Officer Chin this time. She didn't slow down, but Tucker saw her double-take in his peripheral vision. That would be around the station soon, he knew. Questions would be asked. Reports would be filed. The thing about these streams, Ruiz said, his voice still casual but carrying an underlying steel, is that they don't just disappear. They get saved, shared, analyzed. People slow them down, zoom in, discuss every detail. It's fascinating, really, how much attention these interactions get. Tucker felt trapped in a way he'd never experienced before. His usual tools, authority, intimidation, the subtle threat of consequences, were useless here. Worse than useless, they were potential weapons against him, each one capable of being twisted and turned back on him by hundreds of watching eyes. The sun climbed higher, traffic increased, and Tucker stood on the shoulder of Route 16, watching his 15 years of comfortable authority dissolve under the unblinking gaze of Ruiz's camera. Each passing minute made his position more untenable. Each new viewer added another witness to his uncertainty. 900 viewers now, Ruiz announced, as if reading a weather report. They're starting to ask about department policy on detention times for traffic stops. Should I share that information with them? Tucker straightened his shoulders, making a decision. He'd end this now on his terms, before the situation could spiral any further. All right, Mr. Ruiz, you're free to go. Am I? Ruiz asked, not moving from his spot. Just like that? 950 people are watching now, Officer Tucker. They're wondering what changed between the trunk search and this moment. Tucker felt his face grow hot. Unless you'd prefer I write you a warning for impeding traffic? Impeding traffic? Ruiz's eyebrows rose slightly. I was pulled over by you, Officer Tucker. The viewers can see that clearly. In fact, they've been timing the stop. We're at 37 minutes now. Someone just commented that the average traffic stop should take between 8 and 15 minutes. A pickup truck rumbled past, its driver craning his neck to look. Tucker recognized him as one of the regulars from the local diner, where Tucker often stopped for coffee during his morning patrols. The man's obvious curiosity felt like another small crack in Tucker's carefully maintained image. Look, Tucker said, trying to keep his voice professional. We're done here. You can go. Of course, Ruiz nodded, but still didn't move toward his car. I just want to make sure we're both clear on why I was stopped in the first place. For the record, you know? The viewers are quite interested in that part. Tucker felt the trap closing around him. Any answer he gave would sound weak now, especially to the growing audience. Driving under the speed limit? Following his instincts? None of it would play well on camera. Just a routine stop, he managed, knowing how hollow the word sounded. A routine stop, Ruiz repeated thoughtfully. For driving carefully on a public road. The viewers find that interesting. Someone just posted the state vehicle code regarding speed limits. Would you like me to read it? Tucker's radio crackled again. Another status check. He grabbed it quickly, hoping to cut off whatever Ruiz was about to say. Unit 247, clear from stop shortly. Shortly? Ruiz echoed after Tucker released the radio button. We've been here quite a while already, Officer Tucker. The viewers are wondering what's keeping us. Some are speculating about possible violations of constitutional rights. Would you like to address their concerns? Tucker felt sweat rolling down his back now. He'd thought ending the stop would give him back control, but somehow Ruiz had turned even that into another opportunity to push back. The red light on the dashboard camera continued its steady blink, recording every moment of his discomfort. Over 1,000 viewers now. Ruiz updated casually. Someone just mentioned they're recording the stream for later analysis. These interactions can be quite educational, don't you think? You know what people find most interesting about these streams? Ruiz continued, his voice still maintaining that casual tone that had been grating on Tucker's nerves. It's not the dramatic moments. It's the small things. The way an officer stands. The questions they ask. The assumptions they make. Another police cruiser appeared in the distance, and this time Tucker recognized Sergeant Miller's vehicle. His heart sank as the car slowed, then pulled onto the shoulder behind his patrol car. The sergeant had probably heard about the extended stop over the radio, or worse, someone at the station had seen the stream. Looks like we have company, Ruiz observed mildly. The viewers are excited about this development. Someone just pulled up the department's chain of command structure. Sergeant Miller, isn't it? Tucker's mouth went dry. Of course Ruiz would know the sergeant's name. He probably had the entire department's organizational chart memorized, ready to drop names and ranks as needed. The sound of Miller's car door closing seemed impossibly loud in the morning air. Everything all right here, Tucker? Miller asked as he approached, his eyes moving between Tucker and Ruiz, taking in the scene. Yes, sir. Tucker responded quickly. Just finishing up a routine stop. Routine? Ruiz echoed, his voice carrying just enough to reach Miller. 43 minutes seems like a long time for routine, doesn't it? The viewers certainly think so. Miller's expression shifted slightly. Viewers? Oh yes, Ruiz said cheerfully. We're live streaming. Over 1,100 people watching now. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience, Sergeant? Tucker watched as Miller processed this information, saw the moment his superior officer understood the situation. The sergeant's face remained professional, but Tucker caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Mr. Ruiz was just leaving, Tucker said quickly, hoping to end this before it got worse. Was I? Ruiz asked. I thought we were still discussing the reason for the stop. The viewers are quite interested in that part, especially the trunk search. Someone just cited Terry versus Ohio. Are you familiar with that case, Sergeant Miller's? Miller's gaze shifted to Tucker, and in that look, Tucker saw his 15 years of reputation beginning to crumble. The sergeant would have to file a report about this, would have to explain why he'd been called to a routine traffic stop that had turned into a social media event. The department takes community engagement very seriously, Miller said carefully, clearly aware of the recording. If there are any concerns about this stop dash... Oh, there are quite a few concerns, Ruiz interrupted smoothly. The viewers have been documenting them. Would you like to see the list? It's quite comprehensive. Someone even started timestamping the potential policy violations. Tucker felt his chest tighten. Potential policy violations. The words hung in the air like smoke, visible to everyone watching. He could almost see tomorrow's meeting with the captain, could imagine explaining why a simple traffic stop had turned into a viral video about police conduct. 1,200 viewers now, Ruiz announced. They're particularly interested in your arrival, Sergeant Miller. Someone just mentioned that supervisor presence at routine traffic stops might indicate a deeper issue. What are your thoughts on that? The morning sun beat down on Route 16 as Tucker watched his career slowly unravel. Sergeant Miller stood between him and Ruiz now, a physical representation of the department's authority stepping in to manage a situation Tucker had lost control of long ago. Mr. Ruiz, Miller said, his voice carrying the practiced calm of a veteran officer, if you have concerns about the stop, there are official channels dash. Oh, I'm aware of the channels, Ruiz interrupted smoothly. In fact, The viewers just pulled up the department's civilian complaint procedure. Shall we review it together? 1,300 people are quite interested in the process. Tucker's phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably another message from the captain. He left it there, unable to face whatever it might say. The red light on Ruiz's dashboard camera continued its steady blink, recording every moment of his professional demolition. "Tucker," Miller said quietly, turning slightly away from the camera, "why don't you head back to your vehicle and finish up the paperwork?" It was a lifeline, a chance to step away from the camera's unblinking eye, but Tucker knew it was also an admission of defeat. He'd be writing reports about this stop for days, trying to justify actions that looked worse with each passing minute. "Actually," Ruiz spoke up, "Officer Tucker hasn't completed our interaction yet. We were just discussing the basis for the stop and subsequent search. The viewers are particularly interested in that part." Someone just quoted the department's policy on pretextual stops. "Would you like me to share it?" Miller's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign that Ruiz's words had hit home. Tucker knew the sergeant was thinking about the same things he was. Internal reviews, media inquiries, community meetings. All because of one traffic stop that had gone horribly wrong. 1,400 viewers now, Ruiz announced casually. They're sharing some interesting statistics about traffic stops in Cedar Grove. Did you know someone's been collecting data on stop durations and search rates? They've even broken it down by officer. Your name comes up quite a bit, Officer Tucker. The words hit Tucker like physical blows. Someone had been watching, documenting, building a case. How many other stops had been recorded? How many times had he pushed the boundaries of procedure, thinking no one would notice or care? A news van pulled onto the shoulder up ahead, its antenna rising slowly into the morning sky. Tucker felt his stomach drop. Local media. They must have picked up on the stream somehow, or maybe someone had called them. Either way, this had just escalated from social media scrutiny to potential headlines. "Looks like Channel 5 is joining us," Ruiz observed. "The viewers are excited about that. Someone just started a hashtag for this stop. It's trending locally already. Interesting how these things spread, isn't it?" Miller stepped closer to Tucker, his voice low and urgent. "We need to contain this. Now." But Tucker knew it was too late for containment. The stop had taken on a life of its own, spreading through social media, drawing more viewers, more scrutiny, more questions. Each passing minute added another layer to his mistake, another piece of evidence for whatever investigation would surely follow. 1,500 viewers, Ruiz updated, his voice carrying easily to where the news crew was setting up their camera. Someone just shared the department's mission statement about transparency and community trust. Should we discuss how today's stop aligns with those values? Tucker watched as more cars pulled onto the shoulder, creating an impromptu audience for his humiliation. He recognized several local faces among them, the owner of the hardware store, a teacher from the high school, even Pastor Matthews from the church where Tucker sometimes directed traffic on Sundays. His phone buzzed again, more insistent this time. Tucker finally pulled it out, his hands feeling numb as he read the captain's latest message. "And this now. My office when you're done. No excuses." The viewers are particularly interested in department policy regarding stop duration, Ruiz continued, seemingly oblivious to the growing crowd. "Someone just pointed out that we've passed the 1-hour mark. That's quite a milestone for a routine traffic stop, isn't it?" Miller stepped forward again, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Mr. Ruiz, if you're free to go dash, am I?" Ruiz asked, his voice carrying just enough edge to draw attention. That's an interesting legal question. The viewers have been debating it. At what point does a traffic stop become an illegal detention? The courts have been quite clear about this. The news crew had their camera up now, its lens focused on the scene. Tucker could already imagine the evening news headlines. Routine traffic stop turns into social media events, or worse, local officers' actions draw scrutiny. 1,600 viewers, Ruiz announced. Someone just started a live blog analyzing the constitutional implications of this stop. They're citing case law. Very thorough. Should I read some of their findings? Tucker felt the weight of every eye on him. The camera's unblinking stare, the news crew's professional interest, the locals' undisguised curiosity, and worst of all, Miller's barely concealed disappointment. 15 years of carefully built reputation crumbling under the weight of one morning's mistakes. The channel's legal expert just joined the stream, Ruiz added casually. She's sharing some interesting perspectives on Fourth Amendment rights and police procedure. Would you like to address her points, Officer Tuckers? More vehicles were pulling over now, drawn by the news van and the growing crowd. Tucker recognized faces from his daily patrols, shop owners, school parents, people he'd thought respected him. Now they stood watching as his authority dissolved under the merciless scrutiny of Ruiz's camera and its growing audience. 1,700 viewers, Ruiz updated. They're discussing department training protocols now. Someone found the manual online. Interesting reading, especially the sections about professional conduct and community relations. Shall we compare theory to practice? Tucker's radio crackled. Dispatch asking for another status update. But how could he explain this scene? How could he describe in professional terms the circus his routine traffic stop had become? The morning sun felt hotter than ever, his uniform tighter, his badge heavier. A second news van pulled up, this one from the neighboring city station. Tucker watched as they set up their equipment, knowing that this story was growing beyond Cedar Grove's boundaries. Tomorrow, people in the next county would be watching footage of the stop, analyzing his actions, judging his decisions. 1,800 viewers now, Ruiz said, his voice carrying across the growing crowd. Someone just started a thread about police accountability in small towns. They're using the stop as a case study. Real-time learning, Officer Tucker. Isn't that remarkable? Back at the station that afternoon, Tucker sat in the empty break room, his untouched coffee growing cold. The morning's events played on loop in his mind, each replay revealing new mistakes, new moments where he could have, should have, done things differently. His phone kept lighting up with notifications. Someone had uploaded clips from Ruiz's stream to various social media platforms. Tucker's fellow officers walked past the break room, some avoiding eye contact, others throwing curious glances his way. The news had spread through the department like wildfire. 2 million views, Officer Chen said, finally breaking the uncomfortable silence as she entered the room. She didn't need to explain what she was talking about. It's trending statewide now. Tucker nodded numbly, remembering how Chen had driven past during the stop. Had she known then what was happening? Had she seen the signs he'd missed? The questions burned in his throat, but he couldn't bring himself to ask them. The captain's words from their meeting still rang in his ears. This isn't 2010 anymore, Tucker. Every stop, every interaction, every word we say can end up online. We have to adapt or find another line of work. The break room television played silently in the corner, showing footage from Route 16. Tucker watched himself on the screen, saw his own body language grow increasingly tense as Ruiz maintained his calm demeanor. The caption below read, "Traffic stop raises questions about police procedures. They're using it in training already," Chen said, pouring herself coffee. "Rodriguez wants to show it to the new recruits. Says it's a perfect example of how things have changed." Tucker winced. Rodriguez was the training officer, responsible for shaping new officers' understanding of modern policing. The thought of his mistake becoming a teaching tool made his stomach turn. His department-issued phone buzzed again, another email from Internal Affairs. They wanted a detailed report of the stop, including his justification for each action taken. The trunk search would be particularly hard to explain. Even now, hours later, Tucker couldn't quite articulate why he'd pushed so hard on such a routine stop. "You know what the weird thing is?" Chen continued, sitting down across from him. "Ruiz has done this before. Not just here, other departments too. He drives around, waiting for stops like this. Records everything. Some officers call guys like him auditors now." The word felt like a slap. Tucker had heard about auditors before, civilians who tested police responses and recorded the interactions. He'd always dismissed them as troublemakers, never thinking he'd end up as the subject of one of their videos. "The funny part," Chen added, checking her phone, "is that technically, he didn't do anything wrong. Drove carefully, answered questions politely, knew his rights. Everything by the book. It's just what?" Tucker asked, his first words in hours. "Just that the book's different now," Chen replied softly. "The whole game's changed, and some of us haven't caught up yet. The afternoon shift change brought more officers into the station, each one carrying snippets of conversation about the morning's events. Tucker heard fragments as they passed the break room, mentions of view counts, comments about department policy, discussions about camera angles, and recorded statements. "Internal Affairs wants to see you tomorrow morning," Sergeant Miller said, appearing in the doorway. The sergeant looked tired, like he'd aged years in the hours since Route 16. "They're reviewing all your stops from the past 6 months." Tucker nodded, not trusting himself to speak. 6 months of stops, each one now under scrutiny. How many times had he pushed the boundaries? How many searches had he conducted based on instinct rather than probable cause? The questions piled up like weights on his shoulders. "The chief's getting calls," Miller continued, his voice low. "Media, community leaders, civil rights groups. Everyone wants a statement. They're asking about department policy, training procedures, accountability measures." Through the station windows, Tucker could see reporters still camped in the parking lot. They'd been there since the stream ended, hoping to catch him on his way out. His quiet, routine morning had somehow turned into a referendum on modern policing. "You know what the real kicker is?" Miller said, sitting down heavily. "Ruiz isn't pressing charges. No formal complaint, no lawsuit. Says the video speaks for itself. Calls it a teaching moment for law enforcement in the digital age." The words stung worse than any lawsuit could have. Tucker remembered Ruiz's calm demeanor, his careful documentation, his deliberate responses. Every moment designed not to punish, but to expose, to educate, to force change. "Captain wants everyone to review the body camera policy," Miller added. "Says if we're being recorded anyway, might as well control our own narrative. Department's talking about implementing new training protocols too. De-escalation, community relations, constitutional law refreshers." Tucker's phone buzzed again, this time a message from his daughter. "Dad, they're talking about your video in my civics class. Teachers using it to discuss Fourth Amendment rights." The message hit him like a physical blow. His own daughter, watching her father become a case study in constitutional law. He thought about all the times he'd told her to be proud of his work, to respect the badge. Now she was learning about police oversight through his mistakes. "You know what the worst part is?" Tucker finally said, his voice rough from hours of silence. He was right. About all of it. The stop, the search, the questions. "I did it because I could. Because that's how we've always done it. Never thought about how it would look under a microscope." Miller nodded slowly. "World's changed, Tucker. Cameras everywhere, everyone's got rights. Social media turns local incidents into national conversations. We have to change with it." Through the break room window, Tucker watched another patrol car pull out, heading for the streets he'd worked for 15 years. The officer behind the wheel was young, probably fresh from the academy. Tucker wondered what they'd taught him about handling traffic stops in the age of cell phones and live streams. "Department's setting up a community feedback session," Miller said, standing to leave. "They want officers to attend, hear public concerns, work on building trust. Might be good for you to be there." Tucker nodded, understanding the unspoken message. His role was changing whether he liked it or not. The authority he'd taken for granted now came with strings attached: transparency, accountability, public scrutiny. His phone lit up with another notification. Someone had created a hashtag with his name, turning his morning into a trending topic. Discussions about police reform, civilian rights, community oversight, all spinning out from one routine traffic stop that had been anything but routine. 3 months after the Route 16 incident, Tucker sat in his patrol car, watching the morning traffic with different eyes. His dashboard camera blinked steadily. Department policy now required officers to record every stop from start to finish. The weight of his body camera felt familiar against his chest, no longer the annoyance it had been in those first weeks back on patrol. A car passed, going slightly under the speed limit. Old Tucker would have followed it, looking for a reason to make a stop. New Tucker just watched it go, understanding now that careful driving wasn't suspicious. It was just careful driving. His phone buzzed with a message from Chun. "Hey, the community outreach meeting starts at 6. You're still coming, right?" Tucker typed back a quick yes. These meetings had become a regular part of his routine now, sitting face-to-face with residents, listening to their concerns, explaining department policies. It wasn't always comfortable, but it was necessary. The video from Route 16 still came up sometimes, not as an accusation anymore, but as a reference point for how things had changed. A teenager walked past his patrol car, phone held up obviously, recording. Tucker gave a small wave, remembering the training sessions that followed his incident. "You're always on camera," the instructor had said. "Might as well get used to it." The kid looked surprised at the wave, then smiled and walked on. The morning sun hit his rearview mirror, reminding him of that other morning. Ruiz's video had become required viewing at the academy now. Tucker had even spoken to a class last week, breaking down his mistakes, explaining what he should have done differently. The cadets had watched him with serious eyes, taking notes, asking questions about constitutional rights and community trust. His radio crackled, a call about a suspicious vehicle in the park. Tucker started his car, but didn't hit the lights. The new protocols were clear: respond, but don't escalate without cause. Document everything. Assume you're being recorded, because you probably are. The suspicious vehicle turned out to be a local kid practicing parallel parking. 3 months ago, Tucker might have run their license, maybe pushed for a search. Today, he just walked over, introduced himself, and asked if they needed any tips on parking technique. The kid's mother recorded the whole interaction on her phone, but Tucker didn't mind anymore. Transparency worked both ways. It could expose bad behavior, but it could also show good policing in action. Back in his car, Tucker noticed an email from the department's community relations office. They wanted him to participate in a panel discussion about modern policing. The irony wasn't lost on him. The officer whose viral video had caused so much controversy was now helping to shape new policies. A comment from last night's community meeting played in his mind. An older resident had raised his hand and said, "You know, I used to see cops as just authority figures. Now I'm starting to see them as part of the community. That's different. Better." Tucker had sat there, thinking about how his own perspective had shifted. Authority wasn't something to be imposed anymore. It was something to be earned, maintained through trust and respect rather than force and intimidation. His department-issued phone had a new app now, one that tracked stop durations and required officers to log the reason for any search or extended detention. Some officers complained about the extra paperwork, but Tucker saw it differently. Every log entry was a chance to check his own decisions, to make sure he was policing by policy rather than habit. Near the end of his shift, Tucker spotted a familiar silver Honda Civic. His heart rate picked up for a moment before he realized it wasn't Ruiz, just someone with the same model car. Still, the sight made him reflect on how much had changed since that morning on Route 16. The video had over 5 million views now. It popped up regularly in training sessions across the country, sometimes with Tucker's own commentary added. He'd even received emails from other officers thanking him for the wake-up call, saying the video had made them reconsider their own approaches to routine stops. Pulling into the station parking lot, Tucker noticed a group of teenagers filming something on their phones. Instead of telling them to move along, he asked what they were doing. Turned out they were making a social studies project about community policing. They asked if he'd answer a few questions on camera. 3 months ago, the request would have made him nervous. Today, he sat down with them right there in the parking lot. "What's the biggest change you've seen in policing?" one of the kids asked, phone steady in her hands. Tucker thought about it carefully. "Understanding that authority isn't just about having power," he said finally. "It's about using it right, and being willing to be held accountable for how you use it." The kids nodded, looking surprisingly thoughtful. One of them mentioned having seen that video from Route 16. Instead of getting defensive, Tucker used it as a teaching moment, explaining how one incident had led to department-wide changes in training and policy. Later, sitting in the break room, Tucker scrolled through his phone's news feed. There was an article about police departments nationwide adopting new transparency measures. Cedar Grove was mentioned as an example of positive change, the Route 16 incident described as a catalyst for reform rather than a scandal. Chen walked in, dropping into the chair across from him. "Just had a stop recorded by 3 different people," she said, but she was smiling. "You know what's funny? It actually made things easier. Everyone behaved better, knowing they were on camera, including me." Tucker understood exactly what she meant. The constant possibility of being recorded had changed how they all approached their jobs. Every interaction was an opportunity to either build trust or break it. His daughter had texted him earlier about another civics class discussion. This time, they talked about positive changes in police-community relations. She'd raised her hand and told them about her dad. Not about the video anymore, but about how he'd adapted, learned, grown. As Tucker gathered his things to head home, he passed the department's mission statement hanging in the hallway. The words about trust and transparency didn't feel like empty promises anymore. They were guidelines, standards to live up to every day, every stop, every interaction. Outside, the evening sun caught his badge, and Tucker thought about what that symbol meant now. Not just authority, but responsibility. Not just power, but accountability. The weight of it felt different. Not lighter, exactly, but more balanced. A car drove past the station, going slightly under the speed limit. Tucker watched it go, feeling no urge to follow, no instinct to suspect. Some habits had died hard, but they had died. In their place was something new, an understanding that good policing wasn't about controlling the community, but being part of it. His phone buzzed one last time. A reminder about tomorrow's community outreach meeting. Tucker smiled slightly as he got into his car. The agenda included a discussion about building trust through transparency. 3 months ago, those words would have sounded like threats. Now they sounded like progress. The sun set over Cedar Grove as Tucker drove home, its streets familiar but somehow different. Just like him, same person, same job, but changed. For better or worse. He thought about the teenagers in the parking lot, the community meetings, the new policies, the changed attitudes. Better, he decided. Definitely better.
Disclaimer: this channel does not support or tolerate any form of discrimination, racism, prejudice, or violation of human rights. The stories presented here are original and created by the author with the aim of promoting reflection, awareness, and dialogue. All content is developed with respect for diversity and the dignity of all people.